So, all right, well, let's go ahead and jump in to Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. We're on the last page of the last chapter called Buddha's Enlightenment. And we talked about a couple of little esoteric things, like what is Buddha nature? And when we try and study Buddha nature, when we try and objectify it, it vanishes. Our own nature vanishes because we're the ones investigating. We can't put ourselves in front of our own senses, and so we have to in a way learn some new tools, new methods of intuiting. It's like studying your own face. How do you do that without a mirror? Or even if you have a mirror, you have to learn to recognize it in the mirror. And we ourselves, interestingly enough, are reflected in the mirror of mind. Consciousness reflected on the mind is the universe, and in that is our reflection. We only identify with a small part of it because we're egotistical or have attached to ego or attached to thoughts which created ego. And so that idea of self is partial, but what we're actually experiencing through all of our senses is ourself. And so we study that reflection, as it were, to find out who we are. But the reflection is infinite, so if we go into the reflection, it never ends. So we have to intuit. We have to go inward, intuit our face, know it through secondary information. But really, it's not.
Could you please mute?
Oh, yes. Okay. I think we can do this. Just a moment. Mute everybody. All right. There we go. And so it's not a secondary experience, like we're intuiting, but it's I said secondary experience, but it's not. It's a direct experience. It's one up the other way instead of one down. So it's a direct experience. There's no sensory information necessary. There's just being. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to grab that essence. So that was where we were reading. And today we're on the last paragraph here. Wherever we go, we should not lose this way of life. This is called being Buddha, or being boss. To be fully in the moment, to be fully aware, not led by anything, not projecting anything onto the moment. Wherever you go, you should be the master of your surroundings. This means you should not lose your way. So this is called Buddha, because if you exist in this way always, you are Buddha himself. Without trying to be Buddha, you are Buddha. This is how we attain enlightenment. To attain enlightenment is to be always with Buddha. So interesting. We have that even here in Buddhism, this being with Buddha. Buddha is sitting in for God in this sense. Instantly my mind goes to Brother Lawrence in his constant recollection, his constant company of the divine. So to attain enlightenment is to always be with Buddha. By repeating the same thing over and over, we will acquire this kind of understanding. But if you lose this point and take pride in your attainment, or become discouraged because of your idealistic effort, your practice will confine you by a thick wall. Yeah, because see, we're trying to realize something. We're not trying to learn something. We're trying to realize something. There's a big distinction there. Realization means it already exists. You just haven't seen it. You haven't paid attention to it. You haven't noticed it. And so when you realize something, it's something you've always known, but you suddenly become aware of it. And so this is what we're trying to do in our practice, and why Buddhism, at least Suzuki in this book, has emphasized so much this notion that practice is not an acquisitional procedure. We're not doing this to gain or attain anything. And that the practice is just that. It's just practice. if you begin to view it as attainment, you know, that, oh, I do lots of practice, and then you form ego around these things, that's a very big danger. That's the thick wall he's talking about. The veil turns into a wall. It's not just a narrow thing anymore. And you know, Mother gives us a little bit of a warning about that. It's quite dangerous to become spiritually proud, because then the very tools that are meant to undo your ego are beginning to compose your ego. And it's a very difficult thing to get out of. And so if you see that kind of spiritual pride going on inside, dismantle it. Go in there and discern. You know, do you find yourself correcting people on the way to do everything during worship prep or during shrine cleaning? You know, do you find yourself always in a position of being the one who knows? These are signs, you know, that might be the case. And so be careful, is what he's saying. To attain enlightenment is to be always with Buddha. By repeating the same thing over and over, we will acquire this kind of understanding. So that's our mantra, the name, which is pointing and indicating the presence with us. But if you lose this point and take pride in your attainment or become discouraged because of your idealistic effort, your practice will confine you by a thick wall. So the other one we didn't talk about there is to be discouraged in your practice because of your idealistic effort. Idealistic effort means that you have a planned outcome. You've idealized something that you're trying to become, or you're trying to reach, or you're trying to attain. And when you do that, you get discouraged because of your inability to make progress toward that, because you're placing your attention in the future. You're not living in the present. You're thinking about someday when you will reach your imagined attainment of enlightenment. And so you're no longer living in the present. You're trying to create a house in the future that's perfect. And that house will never arrive. And so if you are practicing that way, you suffer discouragement. That discouragement is just the backside of ego. It's just a different formation of ego. And so you've got to be careful in both directions. You know, that we don't become proud by our attainment, because we understand this is not attainment. This is undoing. This is taking out garbage. That's the way you can think of your practice, in a way that won't make you proud. Your practice is not building a castle in the sky, which makes you proud. Your practice is taking out the trash that you've accumulated over these lifetimes, these piles of delusion. So the best you can do in your practice, the most you can do, is take out the trash. And if you're doing that for 6 hours a day, good for you. And, you know, everybody should take all the trash out of their house. All that means is you had a dirty house. It doesn't mean you've done anything beautiful because you took out trash for 6 hours in a row today. So think of it that way, and you won't think of it as an attainment so much. And then also don't be discouraged. You know, I've been taking trash out all day and the house is still a mess. I can't do anything. Well, it's still your house. So enjoy it as your house. Take delight in that. All right. We should not confine ourselves by a self-built wall, by these identities, by these attainment ideas, by these grabbing ideas, by these doership ideas. So when Zazen time comes, your time to practice, just to get up, to go and sit with your teacher and to talk to him and listen to him and then go home again, all these procedures are our practice. In this way, without any idea of attainment, you are always Buddha. This is true practice of Zazen. Then you may understand the true meaning of Buddha's first statement. See Buddha nature in various beings and in every one of us. That's that bhakti. That's very interesting to see him end that chapter with the bhakti teaching. You know, seeing the beloved in everyone, seeing God everywhere. So you see, the more little things like that you run across, you start wondering, well, why have all these different paths named out? You know, we're just using different scaffolding for the for the same attainment. I was thinking yesterday that the teachings of karma yoga are really the same as the teachings for mindful living, being in the moment, being fully present. That all the teachings in karma yoga are about that same method, which is quite interesting. All right, so we'll move on here to the epilogue. And oh yeah, we'll probably do this. This might take us this week and next week. But anyway, for next week, we're going to be doing I Am That. And you can find a PDF of that online, or I can post one or post something to let people know. That way we'll all go through the same thing. All right, epilogue, Zen mind. Before the rain stops, we can hear a bird. Even under the heavy snow, we see snowdrops and some new growth. So even before the rain stops, we can hear a bird, right? This is that catching those glimpses of the divine, even before our enlightenment, whatever that might mean to us. There is, in fact, something to practice for anyway, and to be non-goal oriented, to be non-attainment oriented in your practice is the way that you experience that bliss, that joy of practice. Because again, our practice is not to get something. It's to enjoy the isness of what is, trying to erase our ego's projection on what it should be, or what it should be like, or what it might be like, but simply enjoying it as it is, and paying attention to the things that we long ago stopped paying attention to. The present moment, the joy of existence, the mystery of that existence, the immense potential of that existence, and to sit deeply with that and let that be enough, because that actually is the presence of the beloved, of the divine. And so our practice is about that, not about getting that, but about being that. Here in America, we cannot define Zen Buddhists the same way we do in Japan. American students are not priests, and yet not completely laymen. I understand it this way, that you are not priests is an easy matter, but that you are not exactly laymen is more difficult. I think you are special people and want some special practice that is not exactly priest's practice and not exactly layman's practice. You are on your way to discovering some appropriate way of life. I think that is our Zen community, our group. Well, this is a fascinating thing. Not directly, well, it does directly relate to our spiritual life, but I really appreciate in Buddhism the way that the Buddhists have moved into a culture and allowed that culture to redefine it and to own it. So that it becomes a manifestation from within that own culture. And Suzuki here in his efforts when he came to the United States, part of it was because he felt like Buddhism had become overly defined, had become kind of encrusted in its own traditions in Japan. And he was very excited about teaching in the United States because of the absolute newness of it. And his willingness to bring it and let it form, let it take on its own identity, is quite the sign of a great mind. Vivekananda was very much that way also. He understood that when Vedanta would come to the United States, that at some point it would have to become a part of the fabric here, that it wouldn't be this surgically implanted other thing, that ultimately it would take on its own identity. And so this is where his notion of every person having their own religion was his ideal. As many people, so many paths was his ideal. And so for us to take these teachings, to take all of these practices that we learn and to ingest them, to digest them into our life so they become our expression, not just what we're consuming, taking in the teachings and taking in the practices and taking in the words and the devotions and all of that, but digest it, let it become what you are so that it manifests from you. That's as the mind becomes pure, that's what begins to happen. And so that's why I'm always saying, create your own practices that are helpful for dealing with the situations you find arising. Work with your guru, but be proactive. So come up with rituals that help you offer your work to God or keep your mind on the divine. Come up with silly little things that you do during the day to keep your mind, in the presence of the divine. And, include the nickname of your ideal in that. And then all the little rituals of love, writing God love letters, gathering flowers, picking up something on your walk that you find. When I first built a shrine way back in '97, I guess it was, I just had my own stuff on it. There were no deities on it at all. And I remember that on my walk, I would always look for something that just somehow represented something spiritual to me, whether it was a branch or a rock I found a little plastic purple hippo one day, and she sat on my shrine for a long time. And then I moved her to Mother's Shrine in the kitchen in the monastery in San Francisco. And so I remember the first day that Swami walked in, and he saw on the little shelf where Mother's picture was, I had added that little plastic purple hippo. And he just stood there looking at it, smiling, didn't actually say anything about it, just kind of, okay, that's there. And so make your spiritual life your own, make your shrine your own. Don't, use tradition to inform you, but don't be controlled by it. Digest it and make it your own expression. It's very important, because God is your very own. You're not a number. You're not one of many. You're one without a second. But we must also know what our undivided original way is and what Dogen's practice is. Dogen Zenzi said that some may attain enlightenment and some may not. This is a point I'm very much interested in. Although we all have the same fundamental practice, which we carry out in the same way, some may attain enlightenment and some may not. It means that even if we have no experience of enlightenment, if we sit in the proper way with the right attitude and understanding of practice, then that is Zen. The main point is to practice seriously, and the important attitude is to understand and have confidence in big mind, that universal mind, that pure mind, the mind with no petty particulars in it. We say big mind or small mind or Buddha mind or Zen mind, and these words mean something, but something we cannot and should not try to understand in terms of experience. So it's not a relative knowledge, is what he's getting at. This information, this knowledge is a part of the self. It's that we can't really talk about it. It's non-referential knowledge. It just is. And it's available instantly without reference to the practitioner. We talk about enlightenment experience, but it is not some experience we will have in terms of good or bad, time or space, past or future. See, those are all the things of mind. Those are all the things that are activated when you put your identity into mind. And all of the noise, the thought, thinking of mind. Mind generally thinks in language, and language always has subject-object, arrangement, always has a tense, past, present, or future, and all the little variations on that in there. So just thinking slams us right into the world of cause and effect, right into the world of past, present, future, and immediately connects us to all of our attachments and all of our desires, and has us playing the game. And ego is built on all of your memories, all of your attachments from the past. And it's the one that projects a future of desire to attain whatever it is you think you need to attain. And so this is why silent mind is really the key, and the grace of the divine, of your relationship with the divine. It's that grace that is the key to quieting the mind, because you of your own are not able to forgive yourself, to let go of cause and effect. The mind will hold you accountable to your karma as you perceive it, according to the story you've adopted. There's not really a way around that within mind, except through grace, except through this experiential presence of the beloved and the growing in understanding of the depth and nature and reality of an unconditioned love, a love that does instantly forgive and instantly restore and strengthen, in itself by its own nature, not through an effort to forgive, not through a determination to forgive, but through an isness, because that is love. That God is, that's that important distinction, that God is not loving. God is love. And so in that relationship, that which exudes from God is loving, right? But God is love itself. And so there is no other alternative. And our growing in spiritual life is a settling into and accepting and an understanding of that love, which itself melts ego. It allows us to forgive ourselves, to let go of our karma, to let go of the thought structures that we've held in place to identify ourselves and to give us some sense of small place in a big world. But that sense of self is what is blocking our understanding and our enlightenment. And so we have to have confidence, because we're being asked to let go of a branch hanging off a cliff in the dark. We have no idea where that goes and what that is. And that fear of the unknowing, the fear of other, this big imaginary not us that we've imagined, won't let us let go of that branch. We're afraid to fall into that dark, into that nothingness. And until we trust the love that's whispering in our ears, that say, my arms are that darkness, you can fall, you can let go, you're safe, all is well, grace has you covered. Until you believe that enough to let go of the branch of ego and to fall into that universal, to be absorbed in divine love, until you have a confidence, a faith. That's why Thakur says faith is everything, because faith in that love and that grace is going to be the thing that allows you to let go of your mind. And when you let go of your mind, the story stops, right? And those divine arms, that love, that becomes everything, becomes revealed to you. The big mind, in which we must have confidence, is not something which you can experience objectively, right? Because it is the experiencer itself. It is something which is always with you, always on your side. That's grace. That's the knowledge of grace right there. That this divine something, this divine sense which can't be objectified within, is always on your side. That is what grace is, and that's where courage comes from. That's what heals the rift between the many to make it one. Right? Even Jesus, in his last prayer on earth, is praying for unity. He's praying that they may be one in me as I am one with you, and may love be the cord that binds us all together into that oneness. So it's a knowledge of love that allows us to merge without fear, without remorse, into the divine self, to come to our realization. It is something which is always with you, always on your side. Your eyes are on your side, for you cannot see your eyes, and your eyes cannot see themselves. Eyes only see things outside, objective things. If you reflect on yourself, that self is not your true self anymore. That's right. You've objectified it. You've taken a copy of it and put it in front of yourself. You cannot project yourself as some objective thing to think about. All right, there it is, a very simple statement. You cannot do that. So if that's part of your practice, don't do it. Don't objectify yourself. The mind, which is always on your side, is not just your mind. It is universal mind, always the same, not different from another's mind. It is Zen mind. It is big, big mind. The mind is whatever you see. Your true mind is always with whatever you see. Although you do not know your own mind, it is there. At the very moment you see something, it is there. This is very interesting. Your mind is always with the things you observe. So you see, this mind is at the same time everything. See, that's that new tool that we seem to, that I'm positing at this point in my practice anyway, this new tool that we have to develop to do this task, because we're asked to do something that we've never done before. And it's in a way that's not usual to the way we learn something. It's contraindicatory to learning, actually. And so this notion of not objectifying yourself, of letting small mind indicate big mind, it's that implication that we're talking about. You know, we've mentioned it before. It's hard to say because it just doesn't sound as rich as it really is in practice. But you sit there, move your arms, like I was doing in that yoga class. And instead of focusing on the movement of the arms, which makes you then tired and makes you feel like you're the one doing this effort and it wears you out, instead of that, think of the part of you that's not moving. Something in you is making you aware of the movement of your arm. That movement of your arm implies a stillness within, from which you must be seated in order to recognize movement in the arm. That which sees movement must not be a part of that movement. Otherwise, it could not see it, just like you being in an elevator or inside a car and not looking out the window, right? And so the noisy mind also can be used to remind you of the silence that you're sitting in, to recognize the noisiness of the mind, right? You have to be sitting in a place of silence in order to know the mind is noisy. You have to have an inherent silence within. So these are what we do. We take the weaknesses of the body, and we learn about humility. We learn about non-judgment. We learn about acceptance. We learn about grace. We take the impurities of the mind and we learn about self-control, and we learn about the changeability of thought and the temporary nature of all things. And so by paying attention from this place of the ideal, from this place of the unchanging absolute within, you sit there and observe from that place, becoming more and more aware of that place through the reflection, which is the noisy mind, which is the changing body, which is, the all of the ephemeral, seemingly objective world. But you let all of that constantly remind you of what it is not, right? Which is that stable, unchanging, ever-present bliss of contentment that lies within us. All right. True mind is watching mind. You cannot say, this is myself, my small mind, or my limited mind, and that is big mind. That is limiting yourself, restricting your true mind. Now, coming up with any thought about something, any calculation about something, is going to be a symbol. It's not going to be the thing. You cannot capture it by thinking about it, right? You cannot become aware of it by thinking about it. You have to open to it. When you think, you make statements. Those statements are always rooted in story. Those statements are always rooted in mind. And they're always a ripple of thoughts, a combination of thoughts. And any movement in the mind is a disturbance of the lake, the me and mind, that prevents you from seeing the whole moon and allows you only to see the shards of the moon. That is limiting yourself, restricting your true mind, objectifying your mind. Bodhidharma said, in order to see a fish, you must watch the water. Actually, when you see water, you see the true fish. Before you see Buddha nature, you watch your mind. When you see the water, there is true nature. True nature is watching water. When you say, my zazen is very poor, here you have true nature, but foolishly you do not realize it. You ignore it on purpose, right? That's what we're talking about right there. He says, when you say, my zazen is very poor, here you have true nature, but foolishly you do not realize it. Why? Because you're paying attention to the zazen that is poor. When in fact, the fact that you know that your zazen is poor means that you're looking from a perspective of perfect zazen, perfect practice. Do you see what's being said? If you were ignorant, which means bad practice, you would be unaware of your bad practice, right? But the fact that you can see that your practice is bad means that you're dwelling within a state of good practice. You're allowing one to indicate the other. If you know something is wrong, by implication, you know what is right. And so you let the noisy mind remind you of quiet mind, the stillness that's allowing you to recognize noise. You know, all noise is allowed or enabled by silence, right? Silence has to be behind the noise, otherwise you could not hear the noise. And so stillness has to be within you in order to recognize non-stillness, right? So good practice, you know, right seeing, right knowing, dharma has to exist within you for you to recognize adharma, for you to see adharma. So you let these things all indicate really not their opposite, but their fulfillment. You know, that place where there's light with no shadow. When you say my zazen is very poor, here you have true nature, but foolishly you do not realize it. You ignore it on purpose. There is immense importance in the eye with which you watch your mind. That eye is not the big eye, it's the particular eye, because you need a perspective from which to observe. That eye is not the big eye. It is the eye which is incessantly active, always swimming, always flying through the vast air with wings. By wings, I mean thought and activity. The vast sky is home, my home. There is no bird, there is no air. When the fish swims, water and fish are the fish. There is nothing but fish. Do you understand? Something about that non-separation, right? The whole universe is implicated in every move that you make. No atom in the world, no particle in the universe can move without affecting the whole, right? It's that butterfly effect. Something changes on the other side of the planet, and if you were to follow every cause and effect all the way through the chain, it would touch every other person on the planet, right? So it's coming to this knowledge that if you have no water, you have no fish. If you have, you know, fish, water is implicated by the fish. And so the part indicates the whole, and the whole cannot be separated from the part. And so that's the same realization as non-doership. When you start to realize that every move, behind every move you make is the entire universe, you come to understand it is not you who moves, right? Then you begin to understand everything is divine, everything is God, that this universe is a huge apparatus of God, which is still only a drop of that divine. So when the fish swims, water and fish are the fish. They implicate each other. They can't be separated. Your fish can't swim without water, and your water can't be swum in without fish. You cannot find Buddha nature by vivisection, by dividing things, right? By sorting things. That's why we don't go through the senses, because the senses immediately divide everything into five. Immediately divides the one into five. So it's not through the senses. Reality cannot be caught by thinking or feeling mind. Moment after moment, to watch your breathing, to watch your posture, is true nature. There is no secret beyond this point. Okay, this is a fascinating idea. Moment after moment, to watch your breathing, to watch your posture's true nature. So that attention, that presence, that is the divine. That is the goal in and of itself. And simply to be that is all that's necessary, nothing more. And allowing that to be enough, allowing that to be necessary, is a response to grace, a response to that confidence or that knowledge of this divine love, this divine bliss within. And there's no secret beyond this point. There's nothing, there really is nothing mystical about it in one sense. It's kind of his whole point. It's like to just sit and watch the mind is to be enlightened, because you need enlightenment behind yourself in order to do that action. In order to be the observer, you have to observe from that point of the perfect self, the big mind within, right? So you're sitting in that space, and that's what's giving you the proper awareness. That's what's helping. That's why Prabhupada, again, we're coming back, looping back again to that teaching that, the knots of Maya untie themselves in the light of awareness. So all that's necessary is that light of awareness, don't go into automatic mind, don't go into automatic response, automatic thinking. We become aware of those, or should become aware of those, early in our practice, just by watching the mind and watch its tricks. I and the mind is a real rascal. I've shared some of the twisted ways that my mind has worked, or ways that I've caught my mind working, to try and get its will enacted, even though it's not a healthy will, it's not a selfless will. And so that's what this part of practice about watching the mind is so important, because by sitting in that awareness of separateness, it allows you to choose whether to be affected by mind or not. That was a big change in my depression, was understanding that perspective, that yes, I was looking through a depressed mind, but it was my choice whether I took that on as an identity or not. You can look through a depressed mind, and knowing that you don't have to share in the depression. You just adjust the scales so that you can, navigate properly through that. But you don't have to be depressed, right? And so all the conditions of mind are a choice for you when you come to understand you're actually not the mind. The mind can be down. The mind can be sad. The mind can be anything. And it's a matter of choice for you whether you want to participate in that or not, whether you want to be that or not. Because you can still express your Satchitananda, you can still express your divine love even through a depressed mind, even through a deluded mind. And so if you are aware of that, if you can hold on to that, that is true mind, according to the teachings here of Suzuki. That's all that you need to worry about. That is successful. That is perfect. And if it's, that's all. Nothing else is necessary, because everything necessary will come out of that presence. Everything necessary for your samadhi experience will arise naturally and spontaneously from that space of silence. Everything you need is there. You don't need to think of something, calculate something, arrange something, reach something, do something. You simply have to find the silence and absorb yourself in that silence and become aware of something that's very obvious but has never been apparent to you. But it will uncover itself there. We Buddhists do not have any idea of material only, or mind only, or the products of our mind, or the mind as an attribute of being. What we are always talking about is that mind and body, mind and material, are always one. There is no distinction. That's Thakur's teaching, the whiteness and the milk, water and its wetness, fire and its heat. These are things that can't exist separately. And so these separations of Shiva Shakti are imaginary. They aren't separated. They're one and the same. One does not exist without the other. Active mind cannot exist without empty mind, without Buddha mind. You can't have a ripple in the water with no lake, right? So they're really not separate. They're not separate. They're just observed adjuncts, limiting adjuncts that we put on everything. But if you listen carelessly, it sounds as if we are talking about some attribute of being, or about material or spiritual. That will be a version of it, maybe. But actually, we are pointing out mind, which is always on this side, which is true mind. That mind which is encapsulating everything always. Enlightenment experience is to figure out, to understand, to realize this mind, which is always with us and which we cannot see. Do you understand? If you try to attain enlightenment as if you see a bright star in the sky, it will be beautiful, and you may think, this is enlightenment. But that is not enlightenment. That understanding is literally heresy. Even though you do not know it, in that understanding, you have the idea of material only, something that's in front of the senses, this bright star, this imagined condition of enlightenment. Enlightenment is the absolute absence of condition. If you try to imagine enlightenment, all you can build is a condition that indicates enlightenment. It is not enlightenment, because enlightenment is the absolute absence of condition. And the absence of condition is pure mind. The absence of particular is Buddha mind, right? And so that's what he's saying here. So to have an idea, to have a goal, to have an objective, that is material only, right? Because that which we are actually uncovering cannot be placed in front of the senses, cannot be placed into the mind, cannot be described by either, right? It simply is what you are when everything else stops telling you. That's the important thing. Enlightenment is knowing what you are, who you are, when nothing else is telling you. Dozens of your enlightenment experiences are like that. Some material only, some object of your mind, as if through good practice you found that bright star. That is the idea of self and object. It is not the way to seek enlightenment. The Zen school is based on our actual nature, on our true mind, as expressed and realized in practice. So, yes, expressed and realized, just that act of sitting is all that's necessary. Zen does not depend on a particular teaching, nor does it substitute teaching for practice. We practice Zazen to express our true nature, not to attain enlightenment. So yes, sitting is that expression of your communion with the beloved. It's not a seeking the communion of your beloved. That's why I say when you sit, enjoy the presence of God. Don't look for God. Enjoy the presence. And you think, well, how do I know God is present? Well, the fact that you exist, right? We go back to that. Go back to Satchidananda. You exist. Contemplate your existence. See how far that gets you. That's an amazing thing to try and understand. And it's one of those things you can't put existence in the mind. Existence is bigger than mind. Existence is what contains mind, right, in one sense. And so take a look at that existence. Take a look at your love. The fact that you know love, that you understand love. And naturally so. You didn't have to be taught. So know that love. Sit and accept that love that's in you. That wisdom, that intelligence that is allowing you to learn and grow and to manifest yourself more purely every day. That is the presence. That is because God is. And so come back to that active experience of the presence of God, and allow God to not be imaginary, to not be an imagined star of illumination in front of your senses. Allow God to be that which is your envelope, that which holds everything about you. We practice Zazen to express our true nature, not to attain enlightenment. Bodhidharma's Buddhism is to be practice, to be enlightenment. At first, this may be a kind of belief, but later it is something the student feels or already has. Physical practice and rules are not so easy to understand, maybe especially for Americans. You have an idea of freedom, which concentrates on physical freedom, on freedom of activity. This idea causes you some mental suffering and loss of freedom. You think you want to limit your thinking. You think some of your thinking is unnecessary or painful or entangling, but you do not think you want to limit your physical activity. For this reason, Hyakujo established the rules and way of Zen life and the rules and way of Zen life in China. He was interested in expressing and transmitting the freedom of true mind. Zen mind is transmitted in our Zen way of life based on Hyakujo's rules. So they were for an allowance and not a restriction. Right? That's why when doing art, if you come up with a set of restrictions like haiku, haikus are just a response to a set of conditions, a set of restrictions. And so art is really the self expressed through limitation, through condition. And so lots of different forms of art, will take a set of conditions, and then through it, you manifest whatever it is. Like my little 5-inch sculptural things ceramic things that I'm doing. That's going to be a 4.5-inch square tile. You can do anything with it, but you're working with 4.5 square inches of or square of 4.5 inches on a side. So these limitations, and this is a wonderful way of learning that your life is art. You've been given a male or a female body. It's conditioned in this way. It works this way. It doesn't work in these ways. It's broken in these ways. It's doing pretty well in other ways. But whatever your sense of conditions is, your challenge is to create the art of life, to create the art of you by manifesting this infinite self through these conditions. That's what life is. That's where the joy happens. When you are able to fully accept without any resistance the conditions of the moment that it places on you, and through those conditions you live, you express the infinity within. That is right living. That's enlightenment. When my friend Lalita came to that understanding, after she had laid in a hospital bed for over a year because of her stroke, and was bemoaning the loss of all of her faculties for a whole year in terrible depression and terrible struggle, she came to this realization one day. She realized she saw herself inside a broken body, but she realized that she herself was not broken. She saw herself inside of a half-crippled body, but she realized she was still the same person she had always been. And she just realized it was just the conditions that had changed. She hadn't changed at all. And so she decided that she would manifest the real self, her real self, through the condition that she was in now. So she started having the nurse get her out of bed in the morning and dress her, and she would roll around. She decided her purpose would be to go through and cheer everybody up every day, to go in and tell them a new joke. So she started learning jokes that she could share. And she said, so I'm that half functional woman who can't move half my body, but fortunately the little lever on the wheelchair is on the right side that's working. And I just push myself from room to room, just pretending like nothing is wrong with me, and manifesting my true self, which is all I have ever done through my set of limitations. right? And so this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to manifest our infinite nature through our set of conditions to create a piece of art that has your name on it. That is your offering. That piece of art that you create with life by the expression of your infinite divine through these limited faculties. That product is your art piece, and that is your offering. That's what you get to give to the beloved in the end, as it were, your gift to the divine. I think we naturally need some way of life as a group and as Zen students in America. And as Hyokujo established our way of monastic life in China, I think we must establish an American way of Zen life. I'm not saying this jokingly. I am pretty serious, but I do not want to be too serious. If we become too serious, we will lose our way. All right, I'm going to make a t-shirt with that saying on it right there. We're going to give it to everybody in Vedanta. If you get too serious, you're going to lose your way. Start chuckling, start laughing out loud at these things. If we are playing games, we will lose our way. Little by little, with patience and endurance, we must find the way for ourselves, find out how to live with ourselves and with each other. In this way, we will find out our precepts. If we practice hard, concentrate on Zazen, and organize our life so that we can sit well, we will find out what we are doing. But you have to be careful in the rules and the way you establish. If it is too strict, you will fail. If it is too loose, the rules will not work. Our way should be strict enough to have authority, and authority everyone should obey. The rules should be possible to observe. This is how Zen tradition was built up, decided little by little, created by us in our practice. We cannot force anything. That's an important point. You can't force anything. If the mind is being restless and noisy, and you jump into mind and try and calm it, that's like trying to jump into a raging river and still it. Don't do it. It's not going to work. You're going to become part of the noise. So doing the noisy mind is to accept the noisy mind, but accept it from the shore. Accept it from that silent place within and understand, yes, the river is wild today, and you accept the river is wild today, but you stay seated on the shore in that inner peace. So learn to let the noisy mind train you how to do that. When the mind is noisy, don't engage with it and think, oh, I've got to wrestle with this thing and silence it. Won't happen. You just accept it, become disinterested in it, and watch it. And that disinterest itself will silence the mind, according to Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. We cannot force anything, but once the rules have been decided, we should obey them completely until they are changed. These are those limitations that are most advantageous to the realization of self, right? These are the rules that will create the best art, as it were. This way you will know the pure Zen mind. To have our own way of life means to encourage people to have some more spiritual and adequate way of life as human beings. And I think one day you will have your own practice here in America. The only way to study pure mind is through practice. Our inmost nature wants some medium, some way to express or realize itself, right? Because in this world, Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna through Swami Vivekananda makes that statement. Oh goodness! And since all of that, I lost it. Oh, that everything about us, everything that makes you you, Swamiji says, is just a collection of limitations and restrictions, right? So this whole experience of life is really just that. It's accepting the limitations and restrictions that define this experience. But knowing yourself to be the immortal infinite, you express that through these limitations and restrictions. And if you do that perfectly, that's a Jesus, that's a Ramakrishna, that's a Holy Mother, that's a Buddha. You know, if you do it in a wonky way, well, that's what we are. We're wonky practitioners. So our true religion is wonkiness. So the only way to study pure mind is through practice. Our innermost nature wants some medium, some way to express and realize itself, which is why it has taken on a body, perhaps. We answer this inmost request through our rules and patriarch. After patriarch shows us his true mind, in this way, we will have an accurate, deep understanding of practice. We must have more experience of our practice. At least we must have some enlightenment experience. But we must put confidence in the big mind, which is always with you. That silent background. You should be able to appreciate things as an expression of big mind. That's seeing God everywhere. That's seeing God as the doer. You recognize everything, all movement as expression. Expression of what? Expression of this divine stillness behind. This is more than faith. This is ultimate truth, which you cannot reject. Whether it is difficult or easy to practice, difficult or easy to understand, you can only practice it. Priest or layman is not the point. To find yourself as someone who is doing something is the point. To resume your actual being through practice, to resume the you, which is always with everything, with Buddha, which is fully supported by everything. Right now, you may say it is impossible, but it is possible. Even in one moment, you can do it. It is possible this moment. It is this moment. That you can do it in this moment means you can always do it. So if you have this confidence, this is faith, this is that faith. This is your enlightenment experience. If you have this strong confidence in your big mind, you are already a Buddhist in the true sense, even though you do not attain enlightenment. That is why Dogen Zenji says, do not expect that all who practice Zazen will attain enlightenment about this mind, which is always with us. He meant, if you think that big mind is somewhere outside of yourself, outside of your practice, then that is a mistake. Big mind is always with us. That is why I repeat the same thing over and over when I think you do not understand. Zen is not just for the man who can fold his legs or who has great spiritual ability. Everyone has Buddha nature. We must find some way to realize our true nature. The purpose of practice is to have direct experience of the Buddha nature, which everyone has. Whatever you do should be the direct experience of Buddha nature. Buddha nature means to be aware of Buddha nature. Your effort should extend to saving all sentient beings. If my words are not good enough, I'll hit you. Then you will understand what I mean. And if you do not understand me just now, someday you will. Someday, someone will understand. I will wait for the island I was told is moving slowly up the coast from Los Angeles to Seattle. I feel Americans, especially young Americans, I have a great opportunity to find out the true way of life for human beings. You are quite free from material things, and you begin Zen practice with a very pure mind, a beginner's mind. You can understand Buddha's teaching exactly as he meant it, but we must not be attached to America or to Buddhism or even to our practice. We must have beginner's mind, free from possessing anything, a mind that knows everything is in a flowing change. Nothing exists but momentarily in this present form and color. One thing flows into another and cannot be grasped. Before the rain stops, we hear a bird. Even under the heavy snow, we see snowdrops and some new growth. In the east, I saw a rhubarb already. In Japan, in the spring, we eat cucumbers. That was very Buddhist. The last sentence of such a great book. In Japan, in the spring, we eat cucumbers. That's a wonderful statement.
What does it mean, Swamiji?
Well, I think you could ponder it for a while and come up with a lot of deep meanings, and it will always mean something deeper. But initially, what it means to me is that's if you're going to try and put everything that the book has just taught us into a sentence, that is equally as nonsensical as to just summarize it by saying, in the spring in Japan, we eat cucumber. It's a statement of truth, and it has reality, and it means something. But because it's existing in a sentence form, it's missing utterly what the whole point is. The whole point is that no sentence can be composed which can teach you what you are. That we can only come up with words that will rattle the screws that are screwing us to our ignorance, to our lack of understanding. So it's a sloughing off and not a gaining. It's a silence and not a speaking. It's an isness and not a doing. All of those things coming together. So, good question though. In the spring in Japan, we eat cucumbers. I think we'll do a blog on that. That has a lot of fun stuff in there. So, all right. Well, next week we're going to start with "I Am That" by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I'll on the description on the onespirit.center page, I'll put a link to the PDF for it. And I'll probably do that by this afternoon. I have to get these last two classes up as well, tonight's class and this morning's class. So.
Yes, I have this book from Nisargadatta. Is this it?
Let me see here.
It's Dutch.
Dat Vak Ipin. Yeah, that looks like it's it.
They
spelled everything wrong. But yes, that's the book.
Okay. I was already reading it.
Oh, good. Excellent. Yeah, it's one of those books that you'll be reading and rereading for the rest of your life once you.
It's the only book. And we need you to explain it.
Well, yeah, I'll add my cucumber salad to it. That's what I'll do. Yeah. No, it's I just have such good memories of that book. It was such an idealistic time for me. I had just joined the monastery. I was 3 or 4 years into it. I found that book on the bookshelf in the monastery library. And there's a big wingback chair in the front room that had a view out the front windows of the Golden Gate Bridge and the Marin Mountains there. And every day, after breakfast had died down and all my chores were finished, I'd go and I would sit in the sun in this front room with that view and read just 1 or 2 couplets, a Q&A, and just sit with it. Literally, just have tea with those scriptures, and just let my mind kind of try and chase down the different implications, because some of the teachings in that book, just literally take the lid off your head. You just can't. They sometimes even feel almost painful to contemplate, because it's just making the mind bend in such an odd distortion. They're wonderful. It'll be a fun book.
Yeah.
So he has written himself, or somebody else has compiled all that?
It's a compilation. It's a meeting. I have to read the introduction again, but from what I remember, it's an American seeker who goes to visit him and basically asks him all of these questions and records all of his questions and all of his answers. And that's one of the reasons I liked it, because it's one of the few spiritual books that seemed to ask the questions that I would ask. You know,
One of his main disciples was Ramesh Balsekar, and he has written a lot of these books also. I haven't read anything, but I just thought that whether he
Yeah.
wrote directly or.
yeah, I don't think he wrote anything directly. I think it's all done by his disciples. But they're you know, he just asks him a question and then he responds, and then he'll, you know, and then the whole conversation that ensues will be recorded. And it's great because it was the first time, like I mentioned, it was the first book that was written like that, where the questions seemed to be questions that I would ask, you know, that occurred in my mind. And so that made it a much more interesting read for me. I could just really sink into it because they weren't asking questions from an unfamiliar perspective for me. So it's been a powerful book anyway. Many ideas have grown out of that. Many movements of peace have come from that book.
Or was he like Raman Maharshi? He's more like Raman Maharshi?
Yes, he's a Gyani. Absolutely. He and Ramana Maharshi are of the same feather. Yes. So, but we're all of the same feather, ultimately.
We still have to grow our feathers.
Yeah, the thing is that, you know, as I go on in this, and I, you know, it's becoming such a prevalent idea in my mind. I hope it holds itself. But you know, if you teach Jnana Yoga using Bhakti words, it becomes Bhakti Yoga. If you teach Jnana Yoga using Jnanic vocabulary, it's going to be Jnana Yoga. If you teach Bhakti Yoga using Christian vocabulary, it's going to be Christianity. You know, and so it's quite amazing that these fundamental principles manifest as all the world's traditions. And it's really only a matter of scaffolding, mythology, and language, and ritual, of course, that make them different. But all of those things that are different, if you do this practice that we're talking about by paying attention to what's indicated rather than the thing itself, you will see that all the scaffolding and all the mythologies and all the rituals of these different world traditions are all pointing at the same central truth. They're all singing the Vedas. They're all singing the Upanishads, just through their different manifestations. And of course it's that way, because you and me are just different manifestations of the same God pouring through a set of limitations and restrictions. You know, so you and I are simply God with this mind, God with this body. And that's our realization. And so that's where our oneness lies, is at the essence of our nature, of what we are. And in religion, that's where true religion lies, is at the essence, it is at the central essence of which all of the world's mythologies, rituals, and vocabularies are indicating. So that the religion are not the thing themselves. They're all the same reflection of a one core, the central Sanatana Dharma, you know, that manifests as all religions. Sanatana Dharma and Hinduism are not synonyms. Sanatana Dharma can manifest as Hinduism. Sanatana Dharma can manifest as Christianity. Sanatana Dharma manifests as Islam. All religions that last are manifestations of the Sanatana Dharma, a light going through that gem. So the gem, the whole gem, is Sanatana Dharma. All the facets of that beautiful gem, through which the whole gem can be appreciated. But each facet is just a world religion, a world tradition. You know, I started using tradition instead of religion because I really want to emphasize that religion isn't plural. Life is religion. It's all inclusive. You know, it cannot be divided out. There is none such thing as a non-religious person. You know, everybody. Yes, there it is.
Sorry. Sorry, please finish.
No, it's all right. I'm seeing Prafula. Prafula, you're muted, so we can't hear you.
No, this is Nandini.
Oh, okay, Nandini.
Sorry.
I,
Yeah.
What I was just saying, since you are saying that Sanatan Dharma underlies everything basically, because a lot of people ask what's the difference between Hinduism and, how is Sanatan Dharma different? What would you say about the basic main tenets of the Sanatan Dharma that reflect in all the religions or faiths?
what was that last question again? I was following you up until the last statement there.
No, people always ask what's the difference between Hinduism and Sanatan Dharma, which since Sanatan Dharma you're saying underlies all the other religions and faiths, what would be the main that underlie everything?
Well, this is according to my own understanding. I'm not standing up saying there's only one way to understand Sanatana Dharma. So that's my first statement. I'm a Vedantist, so I accept all arguments. But as it's arranging in my mind at this point, Sanatana Dharma indicates a meta-religion. So it indicates it indicates the real problem, which is egoism, blocking us from our divine nature. It presents the ideal of love as the ultimate reality, wisdom and existence as the qualities, the infinite qualities of the divine, and kind of lays out all of the groundwork like that. Then the religions bring in their ritual, bring in their mythology, bring in their vocabulary, bring in their theology, bring in their practices, which all will serve to work on the temple. It's like whatever scaffolding you arrange around the building, it's to paint the building. And so Sanatana Dharma is religion without the specifics. When you put in the specifics, it becomes a particular tradition. So Hinduism, takes the Sanatana Dharma and puts in the deities, puts in the rituals, puts in the stories, puts in the mythology, puts in the practices, which are all fruits of the Sanatana Dharma, but not the only fruit of the Sanatana Dharma. And so Hinduism becomes an instance. If you're a computer programmer, you would say something like that Hinduism is an instance of Sanatana Dharma. Christianity is an instance of Sanatana Dharma. Buddhism is an instance of Sanatana Dharma. And so, but that the Sanatana Dharma has to remain, it's the pure form without the specifics hanging on it. So, yes.
Name started after Vedas and the right behavior, because there were no written down document, nothing. So people have to behave according to dharma. Word was coined. Dharma means a right behavior. In Mahabharata time, there's Sanatan Dharma. Okay, this is Sanatan Dharma. Then Hinduism all came with the dogmas and all. But it started, so Hinduism's roots are in Sanatan Dharma.
Right, yes, but by the Vedas, no books are indicated, according to Swamiji. So the Vedas are actually the truth of this moment. If we crystallize this moment into text, we will rewrite the Vedas.
Yeah, and we hear these things, Sanatan Dharma, in earlier Purana and Mahabharata many times. Okay, you behave according to Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma doesn't say this. They never talk about Hinduism at that time.
Right. Yeah. Hinduism didn't exist until it was a name given in. I've just read this last week in Wikipedia. Wikipedia's got a great article about where the name Hinduism started from, and it was basically given. It was a name given by the Muslim invaders at the time to indicate everybody who wasn't Muslim. So it was a blanket term for anybody who wasn't Muslim. It didn't mean anything in particular. And so
each one was supposed to act according to Sanatan Dharma. There were no rules like Christianity or Buddha or anything like that. But it was very loose term.
Yes. That's exactly what I'm excited about, is trying to bring our notion of religion back to the day when there was no religions. Where religion really was just trying to understand life, to understand our presence, to understand our nature. What is this thing called life? What is this thing called being? What is this body? What is this mind? What am I supposed to do here? Religion is just living. It's living an aware life.
One question in this, there are many people, many, not the disciples, but people who visited him, Nisargadatta Maharaj, and asked questions from all over the world, different parts. Very interesting questions because people have a lot of problems, trouble. Some they are alone, looking for something, searching for something in the heart. So it is very interesting questions, actually.
Yeah, you're right. It is. It's a wonderful book. So we'll start with that. We'll start with that next week for sure.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it.
Yes, me too.
I'm sorry, I'm not
Right.
there next week, so I miss something.
Well, you'll be there in spirit, Eva.
Okay, sure.
All right, Jai Ma. Be
Jai
well,
Ma.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you again.
Thank
Jai
you
Ma,
so much.
Jai Thakur. Indeed.
Thank you.